Hello, good evening, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I wish you a happy Africa Day as you are celebrating wherever you are, globally, at home, abroad. A happy African Liberation Day, actually. But for us, the liberation struggle still continues. We have to liberate ourselves economically in all fronts. So it's business as usual. And as you can see, we are here to do our bi-weekly session with Kwame Gonza, our Thursday session. For today, our topic is uh, Ghana. It's all about Ghana, a very, symbolic, ironical. It's where Kwame, the great Kwame Nkrumah, comes from, and he's a Pan-Africanist, and the unity of Africa. Whenever we remember or we think of the African unity, the first person I think that comes to our mind is Kwame Nkrumah. So what a great way to celebrate it by talking about Ghana, after May 25, after 60 years. But of course, our topic for today is the recent bailout that Ghana signed, $3 billion with IMF. Because it's suffering from economic crisis. So we will talk about that, how Ghana, one of the biggest cocoa and gold producer in the world, and also how did it get, how did it find itself in this mess? What are the consequences by signing this bailout with IMF, and what is, of course, as usual, a way forward for Ghana? And also, of course, we take Ghana, but as an example for other African countries. As usual, our brother, Pan-Africanist analyst, Kwame Gonza, is here with us. Welcome, Kwame, and I wish you a happy African Liberation Day.
Thank you so much, Mahlet. Thank you so much, and greetings to everyone who's watching us, our viewers. We welcome you today. Happy Africa Liberation Day. This is a very special day, a day on which we celebrate the fact that we were able to liberate ourselves politically after we had liberated ourselves from slavery, of course. So this means that if we liberated ourselves politically, we still have work to do. We still have a long way to do. As you have seen repeatedly, our continent is not in a good shape for certain reasons, one or another reason, a couple of reasons. And so we have to continue that work. That is the very reason actually why we are here, so that we can also contribute our brick, what we call our brick, on the wall of Africa's liberation, or on the wall of the African civilizational state which we are trying to build. Today, as Mahlet has pointed out, we want to look at Ghana, but we are just using it as a case study. It's not an attack on the nation itself, but your typical country today in Africa is a neo-colonial state. A typical African country today is a neo-colonial state, whether you are talking about Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast, by the way, also received just a few days a loan of $3.5 billion also was approved. Ghana, it was $3 billion, which was approved. And mind you, these are the these are the cocoa producers, and they were ganging up to try to ask for an increase in the price of cocoa for the ordinary farmer. And it looks like there is an attack. It could be a coincidence, but which I don't think that is a coincidence. I think it is, it is planned strategy to try to suppress the idea that Ivory Coast and Ghana were working together to try to demand for an increased, a higher price for the cocoa beans which they produce, because they are the biggest producer of cocoa, the two of them, Ivory Coast and Ghana. They are the biggest producers of cocoa in the world. But that is not the topic for today. The topic today is Ghana and the IMF, the IMF approved the loan, like we mentioned, $3 billion. So what we want to examine is how did we reach here, like how Mahlet said, and then we will take it from there. But let us hear a few comments from one of the members of parliament of Ghana and what he says about this particular loan that was given to Ghana.
The government of Ghana, and it's one of the issues we have in parliament. The program that they have presented to the government of Ghana, and it's one of the issues we have in parliament. The program that they have presented to the fund, they have not disclosed to parliament. They have not disclosed to the Ghanaian people. We don't know the full size of this elephant. We have absolutely no idea of all the raft of measures, the bitter pills that we have to swallow. We have no idea. Unlike in the President Mahama era fund program where he called everybody to Senchi, we had a homegrown solution which was adopted, it was shared, widely circulated, there was transparency, inclusivity, everybody was brought on board. In this case, we have been asking in parliament. You remember even the domestic debt exchange program, which is a component of this IMF program, a conditionality. They did not spell out the details to parliament. There was no briefing at all. To parliament, they did not seek parliamentary approval. You recall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mahlet. Yeah, that is, I think we can start from there. We can start from there, our discussion for today.
Okay.
But the member of parliament, what he's saying is that he's not aware, as parliament, at the parliament of Ghana, this deal was not brought to the parliament for discussion, so they are not very much aware of what is in this program of the IMF. But the documents, of course, are out there. Even though it was not brought to the parliament, the documents have been released. And even the staff level agreement, which was reached by the IMF before, they completely agreed to release the money, also was almost like around 2 pages, which was spelling out what is going to happen, to the country. But it is unfortunate that as a member of parliament, of course, he would want it. He would want this program, to come to parliament so that they can have a discussion. But it is unfortunate that it was not taken to the parliament for discussion, and yet it is very consequential. It is a very consequential program. So we will take it from there.
Interesting. Yeah, that this has not been discussed to the parliament, but I'm sure it's not only Ghana. A lot of African countries are doing that without discussing it, even without the people, the next generation, let alone the parliament. Even the citizens have to know. There must be a mechanism to share, those information. Now, let's go to the first question. So help us to understand, Kwame, this, Ghana, it's one of the biggest producer of cocoa, as you said, and also gold in the world. How come it got into this mess or economic crisis? Because for the past, I think, decades, even in Africa, it has been such an exemplar country, which is stable politically and economically. How did this happen?
Mahlet, you allow me to share just one more video yes, so that I can build my case from there. This video was published way back, I think around 2008. This is one of the foremost Pan-Africanists on the world stage. He was in this case discussing he was discussing Ghana's economy way back in 2017 or 18, around there. And it's the same organizations and newspapers, media houses, which came out recently to claim how Ghana's economy is in a junk status, Bloomberg and all those other the Economist, Financial Times. They are the ones in 2018 and 2017 who were saying that Ghana is going to be the fastest growing economy. It's the same, media houses which came out recently when Ghana was facing problems and claimed that Ghana's economy is a junk economy, is junk status. So let us listen to him.
Okay. I can pull for you news items on Bloomberg. I can pull for you news items on Bloomberg, on The Guardian, on New York Times, touting that Ghana would be the fastest growing in Africa in 2020, or is it in 2019? But that is a trick. That is a trick. Whenever you hear that, never believe it. What you ought to do is to go behind the figures and ask yourself, growth for who? Growth in whose interests? And you realize that the driving wheels of the growth are mainly three sectors: gold, oil, and cocoa. Take gold, for instance. How much of the gold do we own? The director was just talking about Newmont. Newmont is one of the few foreign companies that dominate the sector. 5 of them, they control about 70% of total gold exports in Ghana. And you can find this information in Greenwich Bentley's an enterprise map of Ghana. 5 companies. And all these companies are foreign companies. None of them is Ghanaian. So if this is driving your growth, and then they say that you are the fastest growing economy in the world, you should not be laughing, because the growth is not coming into your pocket. Your economy is growing and 400,000 more people are falling below the poverty line. And you are happy? Are you serious?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mahlet. So I think we can start. I'll build my case from there.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So in the year 2017, President Akufo-Addo came to power. 2017, January 7th is when he was sworn in as the president. Mm-hmm. And the previous president, of course, he had done also, a lot of borrowing, and he was putting up a lot of infrastructure. He was building a lot of infrastructure. Unfortunately, he lost the presidency to President Nana Addo. But the claim which is made by the current president is that the country was already in economic crisis, that they had already borrowed a lot. And this is one of the promises on which he campaigned when he was coming to power. And he said that he's not going to go to the IMF. He will not go to the IMF. He will not borrow. The money is there. He said that the country has money. And that is when he was not in the presidency, but when he was campaigning. In May 2018, because I said that he came to power in 2017. Yeah. In May 2018, they raised a bond. Ghana raises a bond. If you go to the internet, you can find this information. Ghana raised a bond of 2 billion Ghana cedis. They raised a bond. That means they went to the international market. They didn't go to the IMF, but they went to the international market and they issued a euro bond and they raised $2 billion to to come and finance the activities of the economy. And through this raising of money, they claimed that Ghana's economy was in a very good shape, and the bond itself, the people who wanted to pay for the bond, they wanted to pay 8 billion. The people who were interested in Ghana's economy wanted to contribute up to 8 billion. So they said that the bond was oversubscribed by $8 billion. So even though they wanted $2 billion, the people who wanted to give money to the economy were $8 billion. So wow. This shows the economy was in a very good shape during that period. Now, in March 2021, the government went to the international market again, and it raised a $3 billion bond again on the international market, $3 billion. So in a period of 2 to 3 years, they had borrowed around $5 billion. And this time also, they claimed that the bond had been oversubscribed by $6 billion. So that means even though they raised the $3 billion, the people who wanted to give the government more money, they wanted to give up to $6 billion. So 2021 also shows you that the economy was not doing bad. It was doing still well. Mind you, in 2020, we had COVID, COVID-19. In 2020, actually, before the COVID, before they would go to the international market to raise the $3 billion, 2020, they received the $1 billion from what the IMF called the COVID Relief Fund. If you remember that period, I even appeared on SABC News of South Africa. That period, we were commenting on the money which was received during the COVID period, and they were asking about Ghana's status, because we remember that South Africa also received up to $4.5 billion as COVID fund. Kenya, I think Kenya received, I don't remember very well for Kenya, but Kenya received, I think, not up to $1 billion. Its reception was not up to $1 billion. But South Africa received the 4.5, and there is a lot of other African countries who were given these loans from IMF. So with that 2020 COVID Relief Fund, which was given to Ghana in 2020, it makes the loans which we are received since President Akufo-Addo came to power, it makes it 6 billion up to 2021 March. In July 2021, Ghana raised, or it expressed interest in raising a social bond of $2 billion. It expressed interest in raising another $2 billion. That is just within a period of 2 months, because I said that it raised, that is within a period of 4 months, because in 2021, it raised in March. It was March when it raised the $3 billion. So in total, we are seeing that the country, after receiving another $21 billion, which is called the special drawing rights from the IMF again, the total can come, since the president came to power, can come to around $9 billion. That is $9 billion. Mind you, all this is before the Ukraine war. I want people to listen very carefully. Ghana had a lockdown of not more than a month, and majorly the lockdown was in the capital city. I think it was 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So there's a claim that Ghana was affected by the COVID, which I don't really buy very much, since the country was closed for business for a few weeks, for 2 to 3 weeks, not even up to a month, when the country was closed. Now, in May 2023 is when we are coming to receive another 3 billion after the claim that the country's economy is collapsing, bringing the total to $12 billion to date. Mind you, this is an economy of around $80 billion of GDP. So if you say that you borrowed $12 billion in addition to inject in an economy, there should be really a difference if you used this money very well. So Ghana has been borrowing, of course, since the times of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, when Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was around. But the way how this money was used is the difference in which we can ask and say, what was the money used for? Like today, if we ask, since 2017, when the president came to power, what was the 9 billion used for that was borrowed before the claim of the country having financial and economic problems? But as we have seen from my brother Hadi Yakubu, who mentioned the sectors of the economy where Ghana majorly, or the sectors on which the economy of Ghana is standing, which is the oil and the gold and the cocoa, we realize that those sectors all are controlled by foreigners. Now, what we are seeing is that with the problems, the economic problems that have emerged in the Western world, and yet the Western world is the one which is the major stakeholder in Ghana's economy, or the control of the Ghana economy. The Ghana economy is like an extension of the Western world's economy combined, because when you talk about companies like Newmont, these are from Canada. When you talk about the oil companies which are here from Britain and the United States, so it is like an extension of that economy. When they have problems at home, they normally come and take the money from the economy, because they are major stakeholders. They are major stakeholders in the economy. When they take money to take it back home, because there's no controls towards the repatriation of profits, when they take that money from the gold, from the oil, from the cocoa, because we don't have cocoa processing facilities here. You can talk of that they are processing cocoa into chocolate and exporting it all over the African continent. Or the refinery is there in Ghana, which was built by Nkrumah in 1960. But the refinery has been crippled by the politicians and their friends and businesses. When you talk of gold, there's no refinery that is refining gold. All the gold, like which was mentioned, it is owned by these corporations. So when they take all this money, and they have problems in Canada, in the US, as you have seen right now, that the economies are going through turmoil. In Europe, you can see what is happening there. In the United States, you can see what is happening there. People are springing up all over the streets in California. Then the economy is bound to face major problems. So this means that however much go out on the international market to borrow huge sums of money, and which monies have a lot of conditionalities. Mm-hmm. On the other side, you are taking some of this money to pay all the loans which we have borrowed, maybe by also previous governments, which is normally called debt servicing, or the so-called debt sustainability. And if you borrow these and you are using it in this way, if you do not have control over the resources of the country, the major exports, the strategic sectors of the economy, then you are bound to come to this level where Ghana has come. And this is not only a problem, this is not a problem that is only peculiar to Ghana, but it is a problem that is systematic all across the African continent. You can go to South Africa, you can go to even Egypt. Recently got a loan, I think it was around 4 billion. Tunisia was rejecting the conditionalities of the IMF. I spoke about Ivory Coast also. The loan was just approved around $3.5 billion. So this is a major African problem. But where is this problem stemming from? The problem is stemming from the lack of control over African resources. The gold, the mine, the mines, the bauxite, the oil. There has been and there is a lack of political will to take back Africa's resources from the people who came here to colonize the continent and exploit it and take the same resources, and they are back here claiming that they are investors, and in the same spirit, they are exploiting the African resources. So the loan, which has been acquired by Ghana of $3 billion, we will see. Is it going to be of any benefit to the Ghanaian economy or to the African people in Ghana? Is it going to be of any benefit? And if the previous loans which had been given by the IMF, the 17 times, because Ghana went to the IMF for the 17th time, if the previous loans which we are given were not able to pull Ghana out of the problems, then what is the guarantee that on the 17th time, those loans are going to pull out Ghana from the problems, the economic problems that it is facing? And where should we be looking? And I think our viewers and our audience already know that answer when we ask such a question, whether this loan will be able to pull Ghana out of the current economic problems which it is facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kwame, really for laying that background. So as you know, we have some kind of understanding how Ghana get to this point. Before we jump to the next question, I have, as a host and as an audience as well, because I believe that viewers also will have this question. When you say that, so like you were saying, they were able to raise, for example, when they asked $2 billion from the local market, there was an offer of $8 billion, right? And there was also another time they asked a certain amount, I think $3 billion, and then they were able, the offer was $5 billion. So I thought local people, local business people were able to bail out that, or is it the IMF saying, oh, we have this amount? I don't understand, because at the end of all these years, the debt comes to $12 billion. So when you say an offer, wasn't that offer made, or offer is in a sense that the amount of the loan? That wasn't clear for me.
Yeah, so there is, when we are talking about a euro bond, when you are talking about going to the international market to borrow, it is different. You are going to multilateral institutions, or what we call, when you are talking about multilateral institutions. So you go to the international market, is different from the IMF. This is different. When you are talking about raising a bond, a euro bond, you can go to the international market, and companies which have trust, like financial institutions, like for example, Barclays Bank, can come and put up money because of the interest that you are going to pay on those loans.
Okay.
They can come, or Goldman Sachs can come and put up money. JP Morgan can come and put up money to give you money so that you can go and do whatever you want. So you sign and say, we will pay this bond, we will pay back your money. You know, they use bond just to confuse, of course, other people, so that people don't know what they are going to do. But it is a loan. They go to the international market to raise a loan, and pay it back maybe in 10 years or in 30 years. with an interest of either 10%, 9%, depending on how you have negotiated. And because you are a country, it is unlikely that you will not pay. It is unlikely that the country will will negate its promises, because you have resources. You have like gold. They assess the investors who are coming to invest in that bond. They actually look at the resources of the country. They look at the history of the country and the management, of course, in some cases, also the management, the leverage. Like what you hear that the United States has borrowed a lot of money, that its debt is around $31 trillion, is because the investors and countries can come and invest in the United States debt due to the trust, due to the power, the status of the United States. So you see that it has opportunity to, to spend beyond its ability. So this is what we are talking about when we are talking about the international market. That is the euro bond. But when we are talking about the IMF, it is another issue. The money that has been raised from the IMF, it is only around 5 billion. The 1 billion which was given as a COVID relief fund, the 1 billion which was called the rapid credit facility, which was in 2020, the 1 billion which was given as a COVID credit facility or COVID relief fund, from the COVID relief fund that was put up by the IMF, which I said that South Africa received 4.5 billion. And then also in 2021, they received $1 billion as special drawing rights. There's another facility which was put up by the IMF, which was called the special drawing rights, whereby countries would go and draw up money, at a lower interest rate. So if you add that money which was received during COVID and the special drawing rights, that's 2 billion. And then you add the recent one, which is 3 billion, that's 5 billion. That is the money from the IMF. Now, the rest of the other money was received from the international market. That is where that money was raised from specifically. And that money, normally, it doesn't have a lot of conditionalities. The one which is raised from the international market, normally, it doesn't have a lot of conditionalities. So that is why you see that sometimes our politicians and our leaders, they misuse that money in one way or the other. And that is how they end up going back to the IMF, and the IMF will put conditionalities, and the situation will become very bad for the people.
Very clear. I'm happy that I asked that question. Now we understand that. So it's all about how your economy. I mean, Ghana's economy must have been good, that the offer was high, sometimes even more than what they asked. So where it is spent is another question. Now, so when this money comes with IMF, we all know Ethiopia has been into it recently. I mean, it comes with a lot of baggage. It's not for free, of course. So what are the consequences or the conditionalities around it, while Ghana, I believe I read that it's going to be dispersed in 3 or 4 years. I don't know if they have received the first installment or the first sum of this money. So what are the conditionalities? In my layman mind, I think of, the living standard will be, the living cost will increase, taxes will increase. Is that already happening? And what are also, I'm sure the government will not think of the people don't know anything. So what are the solution also that are offered or that are put place by the governments?
Thank you very much, Mahlet. Of course, during the staff level agreement, it was agreed, the staff level agreement between the IMF and Ghana, it was agreed, and that has been reiterated recently in the press conference. The agreement of the of the staff level agreement, the contents were repeated during the press conference when the loan was approved. And you rightly mentioned the money is going to be released in chunks. For now, this week, how much was released? It was $600 million. So then after, because of the conditionalities that we mentioned, it is not like the international market, because in the international market, you just go and get all the money. Investors put up money, if it is 2 billion, and then you take your 2 billion and go and do what you want in the economy, and then you start paying back. And of course, when the money was raised from the international market, of course, there was, spending, which was indiscipline. There was some indiscipline in spending. The president promised a lot of things to the country when he was coming to power. He promised free education for secondary schools for the children. He promised to put back some allowances for nurses who are student nurses. They're supposed to receive certain allowances, and he promised a lot of other things which required a lot of money. And on the other hand, also there has been some lack of accountability. Like if you look at, for example, the loan which was given during the COVID period from the COVID relief fund of the IMF, many people, they asked for accountability for what the money was used for, and nothing was provided. Even to the parliament, nothing was provided. There was no accountability. So there has been some sort of corruption, of course, inside, that there has been mismanagement of the economy itself. Now, with this management, with this mismanagement, and as it was, the country was descending into mismanagement again and again, the IMF, of course, was watching. For them, they will not tell you because they want to trap you. They want to trap you. So they will not tell you until you fall in the pit by yourselves. And you ask, what are the consequences? What is the weight that is going to be imposed on the people? What is the burden that is going to be imposed on the people in the country? From the staff level agreement, and also from the presser, which happened a few days ago, for those who watched it, the gentleman who is the sort of like the country manager of the IMF in the country mentioned, I even did not feel very well that he was given the opportunity to read on behalf of the country, to mention what the country has decided to do, as if he's the, as if he's the minister of finance of the country, which was very unfortunate. So the claim is that the IMF is trying to help Ghana to restore macroeconomic stability. That means, if you're talking about macroeconomic stability, is that you are trying to make Ghana competitive on the international stage. That is what they mean by macroeconomic stability. Number two, they said that they are trying to put back the country on a debt sustainability level, or the road. They are trying to put back the country on the road to debt sustainability. Now, when you're talking about debt sustainability, what it means is that they want the country to pay its debt. That is what debt sustainability means. They are trying to put back the country to a state where it is able to meet its debt obligations. It means you should pay. They are trying to make sure that you are able to pay back the people you owe the money. So that is what it means, that sustainability. Even though they use this language to try to confuse the lay person, but when they are talking about macroeconomic stability, they are saying that they want Ghana's economy to be healthy compared to the international economy. And debt sustainability, they are trying to make the country able to pay its debt to the people who it owes, to the debtors. The people should be able to collect its money. And then they were saying that they want to lay the foundation for a stronger and inclusive economy. Of course, that is the last point. when you are talking about a stronger and inclusive economy, then you are talking about the people, the poor. You want to include the poor. So you can see in the order of the program of what the IMF is trying to achieve is that first thing, what the IMF wants is that when they're talking about macroeconomic stability, it wants the Ghanaian economy not to go out of the control. This is what it means. Now I'm trying to explain what these things mean in the real African sense, in the real Pan-African sense. What they mean by macroeconomic stability is that they want the country's economy to stay in the control of the Western world. That is what they mean by macroeconomic stability. We want the economy to be stable where we want it. We want it to be stable where we can see it, operating. So that means they will have access to all the figures of the economy, how it is performing, all the resources they will see, they will have the figures, how much is being produced. That is macroeconomic stability. Now, debt sustainability, number 2, which they mentioned, is another issue of concern here. If you are talking about debt sustainability now, what this means is that you should be able to pay back their money. They want the economy to be stable so that you can pay back their money. Now, this paying back their money, you hear how the IMF has been coming back to Africa since 2020. Since 2020, the IMF has been coming back strongly to Africa. Why? Because in the past, China has been the major lender to Africa, has been a very, is a big lender to the African economies. And in this issue, whereby Ghana had to secure this loan, you could hear them mentioning, you could hear the IMF and the Western world. Actually, I want to bring it to our audience. I want to bring this understanding to our audience that when you go back and examine Nkrumah's work, Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, the IMF as a financial institution and World Bank, they work together with the United States government. They work together with the colonial countries. They are not different. Now, they work together with the colonial countries and they work together with the corporations, which are exploiting the resources. You can talk of Newmont. They are an integrated system, which is there to continue the domination and exploitation of African resources. So when you hear IMF, what immediately should come to your mind is the Western world, America, Canada, and Europe, and then with their corporations and their major banks. We were hearing yesterday when Mo Ibrahim was giving an interview to DW of Germany. Mo Ibrahim mentioned that the people who are stealing from Africa, illicit financial outflow, it is the Western banks. So I want that to sink in very well. The people who are stealing from Africa, over $100 billion, according to the United Nations, not according to us. For our figure is much higher. Our figure is much bigger. Is up to $250 billion. But their UN, their United Nations, the figure they say that the Western banks are stealing from Africa, are taking from Africa in form of illicit financial outflow. It means illegal. So if it is illegal, the word illicit means illegal. It means these people are stealing from Africa according to their admission, because the UN, of course, belongs to them. According to their admission, they are stealing $100 billion from Africa every year. And who is aiding this stealing? It is these banks. So when I'm talking about the IMF, I want you to put in mind that banks such as Citibank, Barclays Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, Stanbic Bank, or what you call Standard Bank, they are all in that group. Societe Generale of France, they are all in that group of the banks which are aiding the stealing of Africa's money and resources from the African people, so that we don't get good education, we don't get good schools, good hospitals, we don't get. So they are working together with the IMF in this stealing. And that is why you see that regardless of how our politicians are corrupt. I mentioned that there was demand for accountability for the IMF loan, which was released to Ghana of 1 billion in 2020. There was demand for accountability by the people, but the people were not given accountability. The IMF itself did not ask for accountability of how that money was spent. Instead, it just gave more money. What does this tell you? It tells you that it is working in concert with the ruling class, which is stealing from the African people. It is working in concert. Why? Because it is benefiting and their corporations are benefiting. So when you hear restore macroeconomic stability, they want the economy to be how they want it. When you hear debt sustainability, they want you to pay back their loan where you borrowed it, because you borrowed it. This loan, normally who puts up these loans? It is their banks and their corporations. And when they say they want you to be sustainable, the debt to be sustainable, and they are also talking about China during the negotiations, the staff level agreement. They were talking about China, that China should forgive the loan. Why were they doing this? Why were they saying that China should be able to forgive the loan, should forgive Ghana the loan? You remember we mentioned that the West holds 77% of the debt, Africa's debt, and China holds around 13% of Africa's debt. So when they are pushing that China should forgive the loan, they want you to create space so that you can pay the Western banks. That is what they mean by debt sustainability. So they put these conditions so that they will defeat the Chinese. The Chinese will not get their money, but the Western banks should get their money. This is what they mean by debt sustainability. And the last point, to show you that they do not care about the African people, is the last point which the IMF said that they are trying to lay a stronger foundation for stronger and inclusive growth. So the African people will be included at the end. That is the last point. After the corporations and the Western banks have taken out. And this is what my brother Hadi Yakubu of Africans Rising, who spoke here, what he was saying. This is what he was saying, that he was saying that the resources in the country, when they say Ghana is going to grow, the growth is not for the African people. So I hope our audience has been able to understand that. When he said that the three major sectors which are supporting the economy, or which the economy depends on, are controlled by foreigners: the gold, the cocoa, and the oil. Foreign companies working with the IMF, working with the ruling class, the politicians, and working with the United States government. Why do you think Kamala Harris was coming to Ghana? These are the reasons. So it is an integrated system of colonialism. That is why you see such issues going the way they are going. Now, the IMF, these were its conditions in the program, but it went further to mention what it expected. What it expected from the government. And the points they went as follows. They said that the government has to mobilize more domestic revenue. That is one of the conditions. Now, when they say the government should mobilize more domestic revenue, what this means is that the government should increase the taxes on the poor so that they can recoup their money to meet what they were telling you, debt sustainability, so that they can be able to pay back the loan. That is what it means, mobilizing more domestic revenue. Number two, they mentioned that they want the government to improve efficiency in public spending. Now you have to cut spending on public goods. That is what it means to improve efficiency in public spending. Stop spending, for example, on things like health, or if you are planning on building hospitals, if you are planning on building infrastructure, roads, stop spending and pay back our money. This is what it means, improving efficiency in spending. You will not hear them talking about the politicians reducing their salary and living within the means of their people. They will not mention that. And that is why you see they use ambiguous statements. They use ambiguous statements in these agreements, like improving efficiency of public spending. But in the back, they know what they are talking about. When they say debt sustainability, they know what they are talking about. They are just saying that you have to pay our loan. We are giving you this money, but you have to pay it. This is what it means. And then, as usual, the last point in these expectations from also the government is to improve the lives of the vulnerable people in society. That is the last point. That is the last point of the expectations from the government. Now, they mentioned financial management, of course, which they said that ambitious reforms that the government is going to do to bring public finances under a sustainable path, of course, to have enough money to pay them. And they mentioned that the government is going to do restructuring of tax policy, which I mentioned that they want they will force, of course, the government to increase the taxes and public finance management and so-called revenue administration. So when they talk about revenue administration, for example, they are going to keep an eye on you, how you are spending the money. You have to be giving them the figures of the country. You cannot hide any data of them. You cannot have secrets. Reform. This is the point which I want people to listen to very carefully. Reform and address the weaknesses in the energy and cocoa sectors. Reform and address weaknesses in the energy and cocoa sectors. So remember, Hadi Yakubu was telling us that who controls the major sectors of the economy. When you are talking about the energy, you are talking about the oil. That is what you are talking about. And then he mentioned the cocoa sector. And then he mentioned also that the government has to do well to attract foreign investors. It has to do well to attract foreign investors. So that means you should not destabilize the economy with your policies, which you think can benefit your people. Leave the economy, don't disturb it for us. And do not increase taxes or renegotiate contracts in gold, in the oil, and even in the cocoa. Like you saw that Nana Addo was pushing for the renegotiation of the price of cocoa. So what they were saying as one of the last points is that you have to put up policies which are friendly to investors, foreign investors, so you can attract foreign direct investment. What it means is that do not make demands for increasing taxes, give tax holidays. So this is what it means. Let our corporations, Western corporations, come inside the country and do whatever they want. This is what it means. So this means, in all of this, what does this mean? As someone who has read some of Kwame Nkrumah's literature, in especially the book called Neo-Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. What this means is that the taxes on the people, the African people in Ghana, are going to be increased. Neo-colonialism is consolidating its position on the Ghana economy as it tries to push out the Chinese. It's trying to push out the Chinese with a lot of force, and that's why the IMF has come back in a major way. And for those who don't understand the IMF, we did a program here on the IMF, and check it out on this channel, Connect Africa. Go out there in the videos. We have done a program on the IMF, but also PLO Lumumba spoke about the IMF in one of his recent speeches and its goals and what it wants to achieve in Africa. But we have done extensively a program. We have a program which has been done on Connect Africa here. Go and check out those videos. We dedicated a full program on the IMF alone. And so you should go and check out that program. So what the Western world is trying to achieve is trying to consolidate its position as a neo-colonial power. It is trying to consolidate its position on the sector so that it will remove any disturbance in its exploitation of the resources of the country. So the Ghanaian people now, they can expect no change in the price of cocoa. No one is going to fight for them because the ruling class, of course, they have not decided to put up a fight. You can expect that the oil of the country is going to continue to flow from Ghana to the Western world. That is why they mentioned reform the weaknesses in the energy sector and the cocoa sector. Because before you were trying to demand, you were trying to gang up with Ivory Coast to demand for higher prices. Now we don't want to hear any of that. The reforms in the energy sector, we want the energy sector to be in order. We want it to be okay. You know that the Western world now is facing problems with energy because of Russia, because of cutting off Russia. So they want to consolidate their position in the African economy, on the Ghana economy, total control. That's what you are seeing that is being carried out. And this is going to bring a lot of impoverishment. The economy is going to slow down, of course, because now the economy will be feeding another parasite, unplanned parasite, which is the Western world. And this is not only for the Ghanaian economy, but also the other African economies. And this is indeed a tragedy for the African people until we come up and fight for ourselves. Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame, for that really insightful word by word explanation of really, how those words and phrases have a lot of meanings actually when it comes to on the ground, on reality, what does it mean, and especially when it applies in African countries. And of course, as we said in the beginning, we selected Ghana, but a number of African countries are going through this. So whatever, this is a case study, but we can all look at it from wherever we are in. If we are from Africa, by passport, we can take that, we can use this as a mirror, and I'm sure we can pull a thread what our country is going through as we speak. Now, our final question is, of course, what is the way forward? We are not just talking about here problems, but we also talk about solution, and of course, it's a Pan-African solution. We always try to look at things from the Pan-African perspective. Not always. That's exactly what we do. Was there, number one, you can answer it with this, with the final question. Was there really wasn't there an alternative for Ghana or even other African countries when they go to IMF? Was there an alternative for them to turn to? And then what is now the way forward when this happens for Ghana? What is the way out? I mean, despite all these imposed neo-colonial policies on the country that literally bans it from reaping its own fruits. So yeah, and is there also an example for us to look at as an African that made it in spite of all these conditionalities imposed by these international financial institutions like IMF?
Thank you, Mahlet. Thank you very much. There is, of course, solutions. There is things which can be done. There is things which can be done. If you look at the conditionalities which have been given by the IMF, some of them are things which the Ghanaian economists have been saying that the government should restructure this, should restructure that, should work on that, should work on this, for the benefit of the people. For the benefit of the people. Because some of the economists, they saw it. They saw these problems coming, and they were cautioning the government on over expenditure on some of unnecessary, and then accountability, majorly accountability. They were cautioning. So there's something which can be done. People have to be accountable. But unfortunately, that is not happening. Now the restructuring is going to be done in the interest of foreigners instead of being done in the interest of the African people. So there is a need for us to trust the African intellect, because the Africans, it looks like, especially the African civil society, the African economists, the African engineers are not trusted. When infrastructure is being built, they bring the Chinese, they bring Brazilians, they bring everyone but Africans. And yet our schools are putting out engineers. They don't put them out there to build this infrastructure. When they go up, even to borrow a loan, even a loan on the international bond market, a loan which doesn't have so much conditions as the IMF loan, they will still bring the Brazilians and bring whoever, the Chinese, to build these bridges and build these roads. So there's a need for us to start trusting our engineers, our economists, and our intellect, our experts. They have to be trusted. Like we mentioned, our experts were giving advice that this is what should be done before the problems occurred in the economy. And they were not listened to. They were not listened to. So we need to trust our professionals, our experts on the African continent. And this has to be pushed with all the vigor we can get as Pan-Africanists. Because if we do not push it through, then the ruling class will continue to grow fat and give out Africa's resources at the expense of the African people. As their children, of course, we have seen they started from Britain, they started from Europe, all over America. This is where they started from. While the other African children, they started in some of the worst schools. Some of the schools, they don't even have classrooms. They started outside in trees. And this is what we are seeing. Number two, the numbers of administrators of our economies have to be cut down. A small country of 30 million people to have 110 ministers is unacceptable. Is absolutely unacceptable. And this has not been done. I know I mentioned it a little bit. It has not been done. Amidst all the cry of the people and begging the president, he should reduce the ministers, reduce the number of ministers. This example is evident. We saw it, President Magufuli doing it. Cut down unnecessary expenditure. The president moves with a convoy of more than 40 cars. What is the point in this? It's unacceptable. And this is not only the president of Ghana as a country, but all the other African countries. Is unacceptable that this kind of wastage of African resources is going on. So the expenditures, the administrative expenditure has to be cut down. So these are things which can be done. You do not need the IMF to come and tell you that you should do these things. Cut down the administrative cost, cut down the servants, the number of servants, especially the ministers and the MPs, so that the people can be served very well with people who are serious. So this is the problem that we have to attend to as African people, and we have to push it through. Because if we want this continent to change, if we want a better continent, there's no shortcut. These people are used to privilege. They are privileged now. They are a privileged class. If you do not force their hand, they will not relinquish. They will not relinquish this enjoyment they are going through. So they will continue to go around and work with the corrupt IMF, which doesn't ask for any accountability from them. The only time the IMF asks for accountability is when the African people are going to be penalized. It asks for accountability when it is its money is at stake, which is at stake. But when it is African money, with the taxpayers' money, which is at stake, it doesn't ask for accountability. So all these conditions you are seeing, they are being put up because the IMF wants to supervise the money so that its loan is paid back. This is the reason. But when the African money was being wasted, they will not say anything, even though they have an office in each of the countries. The IMF has an office in each of the countries. It will not say anything to these people. The state enterprises, which are given out as a reward for political patronage, I think that these institutions have to be run by competent people. There has been the claim by the World Bank and IMF that the state cannot own enterprises. This claim has been debunked by the rise of China, the rise of Singapore, South Korea. All these countries grew up on state enterprises. They developed on the back of state enterprises. So we do not accept that the state cannot govern or cannot own businesses on behalf of its people, because the state is supposed to represent its people. So the state enterprises can be run as profitable entities. They can be run as profitable entities if they are not given out to political supporters as political patronage. This is one of the solutions which is out there. There is the solution of African countries working together and taking back the Africa Development Bank as a tool for development. We have spoken about the Africa Development Bank for a while, and we saw that countries like Japan, the United States, Germany, they are major stakeholders in this bank. It means this bank cannot plan for the continent without controls, without neo-colonial controls. It cannot go to the international market. It cannot have our experts who will go out there and raise money for the various states on the continent, because the bank still has neo-colonial controls. So there is need to fast track the idea of uniting Africa so that we can take advantage of our resources as Africans, so that we can take control of our resources, which are in high demand across the globe. Now, these people are moving around to South Africa, to Botswana, to Ghana, to Ivory Coast, and blackmailing the various countries into accepting certain conditions which are unacceptable, which they themselves would not accept, because our continent is fragmented. We cannot take advantage. You cannot leverage on our advantage of resources which we have as Africans. And so there's a need for the African people to fast track the idea of uniting Africa politically so that we can get an African central bank, so that we can take advantage of our resources, so that we can take advantage of our economy, which is $3.5 trillion of GDP, which is an economy that is bigger than the economy of Britain and bigger than the economy of India, and is the 50th biggest economy if you put it together, the African economy. We cannot take advantage of this if we are disintegrated as African countries. So we need to fast track the idea of African unity. All African people, what should be on our mouth if we want to get out of this grip, this neo-colonial grip and control? We have to fast track the idea of unifying Africa politically so that we can take advantage of these resources and attract the high value investments. And when we unify as Africans, then all the contracts as a point, all the contracts on the African continent, the mining contracts, will be renegotiated in favor of the African people. Because right now, all the contracts have been negotiated in favor of the exploiters who are calling themselves investors. So the contracts, if we unify as African continent, the contracts will be renegotiated without anyone having a threat on their life, because we will be a bigger nation right now. We will be a bigger state. We will be a bigger civilizational state. This is possible because President Magufuli did it without raising a single coin from the IMF or from the international market. Single-handedly, President Magufuli renegotiated the contracts in Tanzania, and he was able to build a lot of infrastructure, build the roads, build the railway line, build a 2,000 megawatt dam, buy 7 aircraft, build a railway line and buy, rolling stock trains, electric trains, build more than 100 hospitals without borrowing a single coin in a period of less than 5 years. So it can be done. This thing can be done, but we have to come together before we can be able to achieve. And there's no other way for us to achieve this apart from we as African civil society. And as Connect Africa, we have already started on that journey. If you want to join us, we are ready and we welcome you. But we have started on that journey. We are the only organization which is trying to bring together all the Pan-African forces. We are the only organization I have seen that is making those attempts of bringing together all the other Pan-African organizations to work together towards the objective of unifying the African continent. I want to thank you very much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame. It's really hard to say anything after that speech or insightful explanation. And yeah, really thank you. Like, you grounded us and very interesting. Yeah, there is hope. There are countries who have made it. Countries like Tanzania, as you said, which is a great example. And I'm sure there are others. So we can do it. It's we all have to make our governments accountable for the debts that they are taking from international financial institutions, because we are going to face that, it's this generation or the next generation that eventually will be, responsible to pay this debt. Otherwise, you have to give up. Little by little, they will make you give up your sovereignty. Otherwise, they don't let you go. It's to listen to and discuss this on Africa, they have two mixed feelings. So let's talk about now. Officially, we have ended this topic, but just to reflect some things. We are like 1 hour and almost 15 minutes. If we can just talk about for 5 minutes. What do you think of this Africa? Because I always have felt business as usual, really. I still feel like there's work to be done. This is what I feel year to year. How do you feel about Africa Day? What do you feel, Kwame?
Mahlet, can you come again on that question?
What do you feel about Africa Day? What's your view? Celebrating when you think of it, when you wake up in the morning or on the eve, what do you think of it?
Yeah, I think Africa Liberation Day is a very important day of African Union, and it's supposed to remind us. The day is supposed to remind us. Actually, it's supposed to be celebrated by all Africans across the globe, including the African diaspora, in the United States, Caribbean, all of them, or what you would call people of African descent. I know sometimes it's very ambiguous when you say African diaspora, but all people of African descent are supposed to be participating in this celebration. The day itself, like I said, it should remind us of the sacrifice that was paid by our ancestors in bringing back our freedoms, our political freedom as Africans. And it should spur us on for us to fight for the remaining, portions of liberation, because the political liberation, as was mentioned by Nkrumah in some of his work, he said that political liberation is just the first step to a more aggressive fight for economic liberation. And so we have not achieved that economic liberation. So Africa Liberation Day should remind us, should be able to remind us that there is what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's daughter, Samia Nkrumah, calls the unfinished business. There is unfinished business for the African people, and that unfinished business is the business of unifying Africa into a powerful civilizational state. And that civilizational state should be able to gain for us what we call economic independence as Africans and do rapid reconstruction at the same pace which we have seen China coming up, or even more. What China has achieved in 30 years, we should be able to achieve it in less than 20 years, 15 to 20 years, because the technology has advanced. We have that manpower, we have the human resource, we have the literacy rate, we have the material resources, we have the capital, like I mentioned, of $3.5 billion. So personally, this is what I think that the Africa Liberation Day should remind us. This is what it should remind us. But whether that is being done, whether the people at the African Union are in that spirit, and whether the African heads of state see it in that line, that is another question for another day. And of course, it is questionable in the eyes of majority of the African people. But this is the reality that the Africa Liberation Day should remind us, that we have a much more vigorous struggle that we are supposed to engage in as Africans in liberating Africa totally, and the dignity, bringing back the dignity of the African people and asserting what Nkrumah called the African personality on the international stage, and for us to equally participate in international affairs. This is what the Africa Liberation Day should remind us, and it should push us towards.
Thank you, Kwame. Indeed, I do agree with you that by no way, we should be forgetful of what our ancestors or forefathers who founded the Organization of African Unity and who fought for the independence of the continent, who supported each other so that countries can be free from colonialism. That struggle should not be forgotten, and because that's why the Organization of African Unity was established in the beginnings, and later on in 2002 changed to African Union. As we remember that and celebrate that and be grateful about that, but still also ask ourselves, where are we? They have done their job. Did we do our job? I mean, me, you know, you viewers and others, each of us as an African, what did we do? It could be, you know, in a very simple matter of reading Pan-African books, things that you don't get in school, and sharing that knowledge to your siblings or others. Or it could be to a bigger cause of being an activist and influencer and mobilizing the African people, because by any means we need to mobilize and organize ourselves. So yeah, each of us can do something that eventually will bring us to that goal of the unity of the continent. Otherwise, we really don't we will not be free from there was colonialism, now there is neo-colonialism, and there will be others, because there are others whose existence depends on our days, on our suffering, on our destruction. Yeah, so as why I am saying all this is because that's why I feel like, you know, okay, I do remember that, but then again, it should be business as usual. I mean, that's it just quickly passed my mind, and sometimes I feel guilty. I mean, what am I supposed to do? You know, if our forefathers were alive, will they be proud of us? I ask this question. What do they say? But yeah, it's good. It's important, at least on a personal level, to reflect how we feel about it. Thank you for those of you who were with us. I put here in the comment section, please, you may support us, our channel, so that we can be here more often. Through our PayPal account, I put the link, and also I have put also the link of the videos that the live streaming we made on IMF. Actually, it's entitled "What the IMF Wants in Africa," and it's really worth to listen. It's a great revelation. Yeah, you will not be the same after you watch that video, I guarantee you. Having said that, yeah, thank you very much, Kwame. I wish you again a happy African Liberation Day, and to everyone. Unless you have some closing, you may want to tell them the things that we are doing, you know, on the ground, trying to connect between our Pan-African governments and also media platforms and African citizens in general. If you want to say briefly something, please go ahead, and yeah, you can conclude it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mahlet. We are engaged in a lot of activities. Like we mentioned, we are trying to connect the African civil society, which is us, and you who's watching, creating that link between the African civil society and the governing systems and the leadership on the continent. So join us in that struggle. Join us in that struggle. We are trying to connect all the Pan-African organizations also, so that we can present a formidable force, because power listens to power. So when we go as a unified force and approach the different organs of the African Union and the individual African heads of state, then we will be in that way respected. Unlike when we go as individuals, as small organizations. So that is the gigantic effort that we are engaged in as Connect Africa. So come out and support us, give us a call, put a comment, put your decision in the comment section, what you think we should do, how we should handle this. Put it down in the comment section, reach out to us and give us your suggestions. And also to contribute. If you want to contribute, and you have to contribute, because we are all Africans and we have to fight for this. So we cannot do this alone without you, the viewers. You have to come out and support us, because like we mentioned, we are not just talkers who are coming here to analyze things and leave it here for you, but we are working together in advancing the interests of Africa and unifying Africa politically. So come out and join us in this journey that we are engaged in. And we will be glad to work together as we build the new Africa, as we make our contribution, as we put a brick or a block on the unfinished building of African African civilizational state and African unity. So I want to thank you very much, all those who have been around. Support the channel, share the channel. Whatever you see on the channel is important videos which we have in there. Go out there and look through them, because some of these events are happening, but we have already spoken about them. We have analyzed them. So go and watch those videos in the channel. Connect Africa. We have all that material there. IMF, we have already analyzed it and what it wants in Africa. Now it is here, causing a lot of havoc. So go out and watch them and share them with others and be able to understand, because this is the foundation on which we are standing to fight our fight for Africa and assert our position as Africans, so that Africa can be able to occupy its God-given position on the international stage. Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Also, for really grateful. Thank you for your time, your dedication, your commitment, not only to come here at Connect Africa, which is also your platform, but in general, you are doing many things, really. So yeah. Thank you. Please keep up the good work. And tomorrow we will be here again. Myself, Dr. Binyam, and others. We will talk about Eritrea, who has just celebrated or commemorated its 32nd independence day, which was yesterday. But a lot is, we're more interested, a lot is happening in Eritrea, especially right now. The way it is leading, it's bringing itself, how resistant they are, how they are telling the West for what it is, with no compromise. So that's really an important thing to bring and discuss as they celebrate this Independence Day. So yeah, you can tune in. Until next time. For myself and for Kwame, he will be here again on Tuesday. So yeah, have a good evening and have a great weekend. And that's it. Bye, Kwame.